British food is about more than what we put on our plates. Our landscape, our climate and our history define what we grow and where we grow it.
This is the mustard that built empires.
Each place, each region, each food has its own story to tell.
Hey! It's the most dangerous kind of farming I've ever known. I would rather fish for shark.
I'm exploring Britain to discover how our soils and seas have shaped our tastes and traditions. Because our food is who we are.
Those were the shoes that were put on the cattle, so they would fit those.
They really shoe cattle?
They are.
Alongside me on this journey, a historian, Lucy Worsley, archaeologist, Alex Langlands.
Definitely whiskey in that. And does that find its way into the fish, ultimately?
It does, yeah.
Botanist James Wong, and horticulturalist Alice Fowler.
Oh, wow, it's a totally different thing when it's cooked.
It is, it really is.
This is the story of our food. This time, we're in Kent. This is the Garden of England, rich with orchards and fruitful harvests. It's also on the doorstep of Europe, a source of new tastes and ideas. And it's all within easy reach of the markets of London via an ancient network of rivers and estuaries.
What's the great thing about falling off here?
Well, if you go, remember to go that way.
I'm going to be travelling by traditional Thames barge, taking a trip up the Medway to see how the white van men of the waterways helped put Kentish food on the map. But my journey begins in the heart of the county. I'm starting with a crop perfectly suited to Kent's soil and climate, a crop brought here from Europe to transform our national drink.
These amazing towering plants are hops, and their pale green flowers are the beginnings of a very Kentish taste, because they're what gives English beer its bitterness, the clean, grassy, palate-cleansing tang that makes British beer beer.
Hops are a very labour-intensive crop, grown purely for their cone-like flowers. Kent became their stronghold thanks to favourable growing conditions and the number of seasonal workers prepared to travel from nearby London. Whole families would race to pick the hop flowers that were then dried before being added in the brewing process to create flavour. Hop farmer Chris Nicholas has just started this year's harvest.
I guess you know when they're ready because of the timing, but is there anything... How can you tell that this particular, this fellow, how do you know it's ready? Is there anything...
Well, the traditional way is, if you look at a hop, there's a seed.
Mm-hmm.
When the hop first forms, the seed inside is milky. As the hop becomes ready, the seed starts to dry out. You can see the lupulin, which is the brewing value, on the petals.
Is that the yellow stuff?
The yellow stuff, yeah. Now the seed is not milky, it's actually quite firm. That means it's ripe.
How many hop flowers do you need for a pint of beer?
Just a couple.
Just a couple?
Yeah.
So, like, boom, these two, that's a pint.
Yeah.
It smells of very hoppy beer.
Yeah.
When it's on your fingers. It smells sort of garlicky when you first smell it, and then lemony. And when it's on your fingers, it smells like... I smell like I've come back from a really, really good night.
You can flavour beer with fresh green hops, but usually they're dried. This would once have been done in an oast house, but these days they're dried in kilns.
So you dry them here? This is
part of the drying system. The hop is 83% water, and we try and dry them down to 10%. To tell when they're dried, I guess get into the kiln while it's going, you grab a handful, and then you rub them. These aren't anywhere near ready. These are about half dried. And what will happen, you'll end up with, if you've got end up with three of just the strigs left in your hand, that's 10% moisture. That's how the old Victorian dryers dried hop.
And you still do it that way?
Still do it that way. It's done all over the world, all hop dryers. They might have got electronic equipment, but it's always still done by hand.
It's a very kind of heady smell, isn't it? It's very kind of, whoa, makes you feel a bit woozly.
Hops and beer have been the perfect Kentish partnership for centuries, but go back further into history and the story is very different. Brewing has been going on for millennia. It's a way of making our water safer to drink. but hops weren't always part of the recipe. In medieval England there were no hop gardens, and beer as we know it simply didn't exist. Master brewer Stewart Main is going to introduce me to the original British pint. So what was beer like before hops?
It would be very variable. It would be called ale. It was only called beer when hops were added. Before that was ale. And alewives, women, used to brew the beer. It was women these days. It was a farmhouse kind of thing.
We now, when we talk about real ale, we do mean a hopped drink like beer,
Yes,
don't
we do.
But,
Yes, we do.
But,
Yes.
but at the time, there was a distinction.
We're looking at the alcoholic beverage before hops came to this country.
Malted milled grain is mixed with boiling water.
It's a lot of trouble to go to just because you can't drink the water.
Well, it's that or dying, I suppose, so it's what would you choose?
Beer or death?
It's just a wholesome, natural drink. It doesn't have to be highly alcoholic.
Children drank it, didn't they?
They would drink it as well, of course they would.
Flavourings like rosemary, honey and heather are added.
I have to say that I don't think I've ever seen anything that looks less like beer.
It's ale, lad. It's ale.
It's left to ferment for several days.
Now you can see how it looks exactly the same, but you see the fluid in there. Now what would they do? They'd allow that to sediment out. So
I bet they
I'm
would, because what they've got
expressing
there is a yeasty-smelling muddy puddle.
this, but it's not going to kill you. And we'll just see how this tastes.
It smells of mouldy bread,
Yeah.
but it tastes
Well,
of beer.
you can imagine that chilled, nicely cool. That's a lovely drink, even though it's
Yeah,
not
so you're going to
itself.
have such a
It's
big
nice.
sales problem with the colour, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you think the alcoholic content of that is?
6.
6. Would you be surprised if I told you it was 13?
Yes.
13%.
Really?
Honestly.
Gosh, I
13%.
drink too much, don't I?
Although our British ale was alcoholic, it was unpredictable and it spoiled quickly. The Europeans were really the first to brew with hops. The Germans were using them in beer by the 12th century, soon followed by the Dutch and the Flemish. When Flemish weavers came here to work in the late 14th century, they brought with them a taste for hopped beer. It took a couple of hundred years, but it caught on, and by the early 16th century, Kentish farmers had a new cash crop and a new drink. English beer today would be unthinkable without hops.
So these are...
These are the hop pellets. Hops have been milled and reconstituted in pellet form.
It still smells just
Oh, lovely.
exactly of hops.
They do. And then we're going to add them now to this copper.
Brilliant.
Shepherd Neame is Britain's oldest brewery. There's evidence that its heritage dates back to the 16th century, the industry growing on the back of Kentish hops. It's Stewart's job to monitor every part of the process.
That's the freshest beer you will ever taste, Giles.
I think I can taste the hops because
Oh, you can.
I'm so into
You can
hops now
you
that
can
I'm...
taste the hoppiness and the bitterness.
It's very
You've got
bitter.
a lingering bitterness now, just at the front of your
It's
palate.
but that seems bitterer to me
Right.
than beers you normally drink in the pub.
Shepherd Neame's beers are famous for being very bitter. We're in the heart of hop country.
The possibilities for beer expanded with the arrival of hops. Different varieties create different flavours.
Now you look at that, lovely golden colour, a light chestnut, with a lovely dry bitterness as well.
Yeah, no, it's I can
Yeah.
see. I just need to just
Yeah,
quickly
to be
get
sure, I'm
just
not-
to be certain. I need to get
I'm keen that
Yeah.
you make your mind up. And, yeah, yes, yeah. That's obviously went done well.
If you compare it to the ale that they were drinking before they had hops, this kind of which had no structure
if you think
and
about
no.
it, if you think about it, we're adding different hops with different bitternesses, give different aromas and different flavours. They would add different types of flowers and herbs to give different flavours. So you can see the parallel between what was done in Saxon times. The hops are added, yes, to make the beer bitter and to give a nice hoppy and fruity aroma, but they're actually one of nature's preservatives. So they will preserve the beer. So they make the beer last a long time.
This means that presumably then that hops not only gave it the flavour, but it must have made it possible to move from a thing that was just done at home to something that could be done on a commercial
When
scale.
it became commercial, of course, and the commercial aspect of brewing coincided with the infrastructure of distribution. So it would start with canals and then roads. So beer has always been part of the Britain's way of life. It's our national drink.
Kent has a long history of embracing new ideas and flavours, But it didn't hurt that it had thousands of customers practically on its doorstep. So for brewing to work commercially, Kent needed another ingredient: transport. The brewery sits on a tidal creek in Faversham that leads out into the Swale estuary.
Morning, Brian.
Good morning. Yeah.
Beer run to
Beer run to
London. with
London.
luck.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That would get us halfway anyway.
Brian Payne is the skipper and owner of this barge, the Lady of the Lee. He and his crew are going to show me how Kent used to get goods to market.
Well, when you're sailing in barge matches, it's very, very thirsty work. Lots of pulling and heaving, and where the crew is in danger of getting very dehydrated.
These boats were very easy. I thought it was the whole point.
Oh, they're easy, yes. Well, you'll find out later.
Before modern roads and railways, barges were the safest and cheapest method of putting Kent's food on the table. This network of rivers and estuaries were once the motorways of their day.
So do we know what route we're taking then? So
I think we do. If not, I've got a road map of Britain down below, so I'm sure we can find a way.
In their heyday, there were over 2,000 of these barges, the largest fleet in Europe. They could navigate narrow creeks to pick up goods direct from farmers and suppliers.